I was sitting in the garage, fixing the same engine I couldn't afford to replace, when I heard my wife in the driveway say to her sister, "He thinks that piece of junk is his escape. Joke's on him. He'll never leave." She laughed. Her sister said, "Let him rot in grease and dreams." I tightened the bolt until my knuckles bled. Days later, she asked me why the engine was gone, but the car still drove. "He thinks that piece of junk is his escape," Janice laughed. "Let him rot in grease and dreams," Brenna replied. I didn't say a word. I just tightened the bolt until my knuckles bled. A few days later, she came out to the garage and asked, "Why does the car still drive if the engine's gone?" I looked her in the eye and said, "Because I got rid of what wasn't working anymore." I've been married to Janice for over 2 decades. 21 years, to be exact. We weren't always like this, distant, hollow, walking around each other like ghosts. But now, when I think back, I can't pinpoint exactly where we went wrong. Somewhere between paying bills and raising our daughter, we stopped being each other's person. I'm a mechanic. Been one most of my life. I work at a modest auto shop in Cedar Falls, Iowa. Not a glamorous life, but a steady one. I've always been a fixer. If something breaks, I repair it. If something creaks, I grease it. That's just how I'm wired. I guess I figured that's what marriage was, too. Something you constantly work on. Something worth fixing. We've got one kid together, Mara. She's 17, a senior in high school, and sharp in a way that makes me nervous and proud at the same time. Architecture is her thing. She dreams about cities with more light, more movement. She talks about leaving Iowa like it's a prison sentence. I don't blame her. At her age, I would have too, if life hadn't steered me elsewhere. Now about the car. I've had this old 1969 Chevelle SS sitting in my garage for the better part of 10 years. Bought it off a guy in Des Moines who was more interested in fast flips than real restoration. It's not running, or it wasn't, but to me, it was more than just a car. It was a project, a symbol of freedom, a reminder that one day, maybe, I'd have something that was all mine again. I guess Janice never saw it that way. That Thursday afternoon, I was in the garage again, hunched over the Chevelle's tired old engine. My hands were deep in grease, trying to convince a stripped bolt to behave. The garage window was open, cracked just enough to hear the outside world. That's when I heard Janice's voice. She was in the driveway. Her sister Brenna had pulled up, and they were unloading yoga mats and reusable grocery bags like they'd just come from a suburban enlightenment seminar. I wasn't listening until I was. "He thinks that piece of junk is his escape," Janice laughed. "Joke's on him. He'll never leave. Let him rot in grease and dreams," Brenna replied. They both laughed. That sharp, pitying kind of laugh women use when they've convinced themselves you're pathetic. I didn't move. I just stared at the bolt I'd been tightening. My hand was clenched so hard around the wrench that my knuckles started bleeding. I didn't even feel it at first. Just this pressure in my chest. My body tensed like I'd just been punched without warning. I didn't say a word when they came in. I didn't stomp around or slam any doors. I just cleaned my hands, made a sandwich, and nodded through dinner like every other night. But something shifted inside me. She thought I was stuck. That I'd never leave. That the car was my delusion and she was the reality I couldn't afford to escape. She wasn't wrong about one thing. I couldn't afford much. We had savings, sure, but life had chipped away at it. Hospital bills, Mara's braces, a new roof last year. The Chevelle was my indulgence. My therapy. And to her, apparently, a joke. I went to work the next day like usual. Changed oil, rotated tires, replaced brake pads for people who'd never get their hands dirty. Then I pulled aside Luis, a younger guy who'd been shadowing me at the shop. I liked him. Reminded me of a younger version of myself. If I'd had a little more fire and a little less fear. "Still working on that Malibu of yours?" I asked. "Yeah. Engine's toast, though," he said. "You want mine?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "My Chevelle's engine. Still solid. Old, but it'll run. I'm done with it." He thought I was kidding. I wasn't. I told him to bring $2,200 in cash and a trailer. I'd even help him load it. That night, I went home and opened the old savings binder Janice kept tucked away behind the family photo albums. I found an envelope labeled Vacation 2012, never used, $2,875 inside. She probably forgot it existed. I ordered a refurbished electric crate motor. Quiet, efficient, modern. It wouldn't roar like the old 396, but it would move. That's all I needed. Over the next 3 weeks, I rebuilt the heart of that car. Every evening after work, I was in the garage, alone, sleeves rolled, music low. There was something meditative about it. Like surgery. Like erasing one version of myself and rebuilding another. Janice didn't ask what I was doing. She probably assumed I was wasting time. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I rolled the Chevelle out onto the driveway. Sunlight bounced off the hood. The tires hummed softly as I eased it down the street. Not a rumble, not a growl, just motion, clean and quiet. Janice came outside, squinting at the sound. She looked confused. "Wait, didn't you sell the engine?" I didn't break eye contact. "Yeah, got rid of what wasn't working." She tilted her head. So how is it driving? Because I replaced it with something that actually moves. She didn't say anything, just stood there with her arms folded, trying to figure out if I was talking about the car or something else. Truth is, I wasn't sure either. And that's where I'll pause for now, because this wasn't just about a car. This was about a marriage. About being dismissed. About slowly realizing you're not someone's partner anymore. You're their prisoner with a wrench. The silence between us grew louder after that. Not immediately. Not in some dramatic, slamming doors kind of way. It was more like the kind of silence that fills up the corners of a room after a long argument. Even when no one's speaking, you can hear what's been said. She didn't mention the car again. Not the new engine. Not the old one. Not the fact that I clearly did something with money she assumed I didn't have. But I noticed the way she started watching me more. Out of the corner of her eye, like she was trying to size up what version of me she was living with now. I wasn't the same. That part, she was right about. I stopped fixing things around the house. No more half-day Saturdays patching drywall or replacing light switches. If the dishwasher acted up, I left it. If a door squeaked, I let it squeak. I stopped playing handyman in a house where no one noticed the effort anyway. At dinner, our conversations became practical exchanges. Schedules, groceries, reminders about Mara's college applications. There were no, "How was your day?" moments. No soft landings. Just logistics. I started sleeping less. Not out of stress. More like, I was waiting. For what? I couldn't tell you. Something to change. Something to break. Maybe me. And Mara. God, that girl's sharper than I ever gave her credit for. One night, we were in the garage together, and she was helping me organize sockets. She looked at me without lifting her head and said, "You're planning something, aren't you?" I didn't lie. I didn't confirm. I just gave her a small shrug. She nodded like she understood. "Good," she said. "Because you deserve better than this." That hit me harder than I expected. She never said what she meant by this. The house? Her mother? The marriage? Or all of it? But I knew she wasn't wrong. Somewhere along the line, I'd become less of a husband and more of a background character in Janice's carefully curated life. I remember a Sunday not long after that. We were at Brenna's house for a family cookout. One of those casual gatherings that are supposed to feel warm and easy, but really just highlight the cracks in everything. Brenna's husband, Craig, was talking about his new boat, showing off pictures like he'd just discovered the Holy Grail. Everyone stood around pretending to be impressed. Janice laughed too hard at something he said, resting her hand a second too long on his arm. I wasn't jealous. That was the strangest part. I wasn't angry either. I just felt this deep, numbing disconnect. Like I was watching someone else's life from inside my own body. I wasn't sure when I stopped being included in her plans, or why she stopped pretending I even mattered in public. On the way home that night, she asked why I'd been so quiet. "Just tired," I said. She didn't press. She didn't even glance at me. Just nodded and turned the radio back on. I stared out the window at the dark Iowa cornfields rushing past, wondering how many other men were driving home with women they no longer recognized. It didn't get better. It didn't explode either. Just stayed. That awful middle place where nothing's good enough to stay and nothing's bad enough to leave. The purgatory of a dying relationship. And yet, in the middle of all that, I started feeling lighter. Every time I took the Chevelle out, I remembered who I used to be. Before the routine. Before the resentment. When I used to take risks. When I used to believe in joy that wasn't scheduled or budgeted or approved. I started driving longer distances. Sometimes to nowhere in particular. I'd leave after dinner and get back near midnight. Janice would be asleep, or at least pretending to be. One night, I stopped by a lake about an hour away, sat on the hood of the car, and just breathed. No traffic, no voices, no expectations. Just the sound of water lapping against the rocks and the hum of a motor I'd installed with my own 2 hands. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a small notebook Mara had given me for Christmas 2 years ago. I started writing. Not about the car. Not about Janice. Just about what I wanted. I hadn't done that in years. Maybe decades. When I got home, the porch light was off. Janice always left it on before. I stood in the dark for a moment, holding my keys, wondering if that was a message or just forgetfulness. When I walked inside, she was sitting at the kitchen table, not looking at me. "Are you planning on telling me where you've been?" she asked. "No," I said simply. She blinked. "Excuse me." I said no. I wasn't aware I needed permission. That was the first real argument we'd had in months, and it wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Barbs traded under our breath. Words spoken just loud enough to wound, but not loud enough to wake Mara. Janice accused me of being distant. Cold. Of changing. I told her I'd been distant because I was tired of being treated like a fixture. Something useful, but not worth caring about. She said something that stuck with me. Not because it was profound, but because it was so predictable. This is still your life. This is still your family. You can't just run away every time you're unhappy. And all I could think was, she thinks this is about the car. Still, she thinks the garage is the problem. Not the silence. Not the years of being overlooked. Not the casual disrespect and the laughter in the driveway. She still didn't get it. She still doesn't. After that argument, something quietly shifted. She stopped asking where I went at night, stopped waiting up, stopped pretending to care whether I came home or not. And I stopped trying to make the house feel like home. I guess, in her mind, if I wanted to escape into my Chevelle, I could go ahead and drive myself in circles until I ran out of gas. What she never understood was that I wasn't escaping to something. I was escaping from someone. From the version of myself I became with her. The quiet man, the yes man, the fixer who eventually broke inside because no one ever bothered to fix him back. I started noticing how empty our house really felt. Not physically, we had stuff. Too much of it, really. Yoga mats rolled into corners, decorative signs that said things like live, laugh, love, which now felt like a cruel joke. Kitchen gadgets we never used. A treadmill that served as a clothes rack. Janice always wanted the house to look like something out of a catalog. She succeeded. But a catalog doesn't feel like home. It feels like a performance. I'd walk past the living room and see her scrolling on her phone, TV on but muted. Her thumb moved endlessly. Not even watching, just absorbing noise. She was present, but not there. I don't know if she was texting Brenna or Craig or a group chat full of women who drank too much red wine and complained about their lazy husbands. But I didn't care anymore. I stopped doing things to be noticed. Started doing them just to feel like me again. I fixed the garage door that had been sticking for a year. Not because she asked, but because I wanted to. I built a small shelf for Mara's room so she could organize her books and design models. She didn't ask either. She just hugged me when she saw it. That hug nearly knocked the wind out of me. I realized how long it had been since someone in that house touched me without expectation or obligation. Just warmth. And it made everything else feel colder. One night, about 3 weeks after the engine swap, Mara came into the garage while I was rewiring some of the dashboard. She leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, that look on her face. The one that told me she'd been thinking hard about something for a while. "Do you love Mom?" she asked. It wasn't an accusation. It wasn't even curious. It was just a question. Direct. Like she'd already asked it of herself 100 times and wanted to see how my answer would measure up. I didn't answer right away. I wanted to say yes. Or at least, I used to. But instead, I said the only thing that felt true. "I don't think she loves me." Mara didn't flinch. Didn't argue. Just nodded slowly. "Yeah," she said. I figured. I didn't cry. I'm not even sure I was sad. It just felt true. Like I'd said something aloud that had been living in my ribs for years. That night, she stayed in the garage with me. Didn't say much. Just sat nearby, drawing in her sketchpad while I worked. Every once in a while, she'd hand me a tool without being asked. She knew the difference between a 10mm and a 1/2-inch socket. That made me proud in a way I couldn't explain. Around midnight, I turned to her and said, "Are you really planning to leave Iowa next year?" She grinned. "Damn yes." I chuckled. "Good. Don't let this place shrink you." She looked at me, seriously. "You shouldn't let it shrink you either." That stayed with me. In the weeks that followed, I began to notice the divide not just between Janice and me, but between who I was and who I had become inside this marriage. I stopped recognizing myself in the bathroom mirror. Not because of age. Not because of the gray creeping into my beard. But because I looked tired. Like I'd spent too many years giving and not enough receiving. Janice started making digs. Not loud ones. But the small, slicing kind. "You seem more invested in that car than in anything else." Well, at least something in this house listens when you talk. Maybe if you cared about the real things, you wouldn't need a garage to hide in. I didn't bite. I didn't fight. I just kept doing what I'd been doing, spending less time inside, more time in the garage or out driving. One Saturday, I decided to take the Chevelle down to Iowa City for the day. Just me and the road. I drove past all the old haunts, places I used to visit before marriage, before mortgages and bills and therapy appointments. I even stopped by a local diner that hadn't changed since the early 2000s. Had a slice of pie and a coffee. Listened to an old couple bicker gently at the booth beside me. And I smiled. Not because I wanted that, but because I remembered a time I used to think I could have that. That quiet, mutual affection. That partnership built on knowing each other, so well you don't need to say anything at all. When I got home that night, Mara was already in bed. Janice was on the couch, glass of wine in hand, scrolling her phone again. She looked up. "Are you going to keep ignoring me forever?" I didn't answer right away. I just kicked off my boots and hung up my jacket. "I'm not ignoring you," I said finally. "I just stopped pretending." She frowned. "Pretending what?" I paused in the hallway. "That this is working." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I walked to the bedroom and closed the door behind me. I heard her pour another glass of wine. Then silence. And for the first time in a long time, I slept like a man who didn't owe anyone an apology. After that night, I didn't expect some big blow-up. And I was right. There was no yelling, no suitcase by the door, no divorce papers on the counter. There was just a strange kind of quiet. Janice stopped trying. Or maybe she finally realized I had. The things we used to do out of routine, Sunday grocery trips, folding laundry while watching reruns, Even sitting next to each other during Mara's school functions, those just stopped happening. She'd do her thing, I'd do mine. And neither of us asked why anymore. I could see the way her frustration had morphed into apathy. That's when I knew the marriage had really cracked. Not during the arguments, not during the silence, but when she no longer cared to disguise her indifference. She'd sigh louder when I came into the room. She wouldn't pause her shows when I spoke. She even started spending weekends away, helping Brenna with her renovation, which, frankly, I didn't care to question. Whether it was Craig or wine or retail therapy, it didn't concern me anymore. I had checked out long before she realized the front desk was empty. And maybe she wasn't cheating in the traditional sense. Maybe it was just emotional, or maybe it was just comfort-seeking. But either way, whatever she found outside the house, it seemed to give her more satisfaction than anything I could offer now. I, on the other hand, began rediscovering pieces of myself. Small things, like going to a hardware swap meet in Waterloo just because I felt like it. Or getting coffee alone at the same diner every other Friday morning. Chatting with the older waitress who remembered my name and asked how Mara was doing. Her name was June, probably in her 60s. Silver hair always tied back, dry wit sharp as ever. She'd refill my mug with a smirk and say things like, "Still married?" Like she already knew the answer. I started to feel human again. It's strange how loneliness inside a marriage feels more suffocating than actual solitude. At least when you're alone, you know you're alone. When you're married and lonely, it feels like failure, like shame, like you're failing at something you once swore you'd never let fall apart. Then came Mara's winter formal. She didn't want a big fuss about it, just wanted to be dropped off and picked up. I offered to do it, and she gave me this tired little smile, like she was just glad it would be me and not her mom. I pulled the Chevelle up to the front of the school that evening. She climbed out in a simple black dress and a navy coat, hair pinned back neatly. For a second, I didn't see my daughter. I saw the adult she was becoming. Poised, independent, fierce, but kind. Before closing the door, she turned to me. "You know, it's okay if you leave her," she said. "I won't hate you." I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat closed up so fast I could barely breathe. She didn't wait for an answer. Just shut the door gently and walked up the steps, blending into a crowd of kids with more hope than I remember ever having at that age. I sat in the car for a long time after that, just sitting. Headlights from other parents flickered past me. Music thudded from the gymnasium. Kids shouted and laughed as they ran by in clusters. But I felt like I was on a different plane entirely. Like the version of me sitting behind the wheel was no longer willing to lie to himself. Mara knew. She'd known for a long time. Maybe even longer than I had. And the truth is, when your kid looks you in the eye and tells you it's okay to stop sacrificing yourself, you listen. Because you realize they see you. Not as the all-knowing parent, but as a person. Flawed, tired, worn down. And they're giving you permission to be more than that again. When I got home, the house was dark. Janice was already in bed. I didn't check if she was awake. I just went to the garage. I sat on the tool bench and stared at the wall for a while. The air smelled like oil and winter, cold, heavy. I opened the small notebook again, the one Mara gave me, and jotted down something I hadn't written before. What would life look like if I stopped waiting to be allowed to live it? No answer came. But the question sat there, heavy on the page. A mirror. The next morning, Janice asked me if I was picking Mara up from the dance. I nodded. Yeah, already did. She raised an eyebrow. She didn't come home last night. She's staying with a friend. Cleared it with me earlier. She blinked, like she didn't remember that part of parenting required communication. But she didn't push it. We had coffee in silence. I scrolled my phone. She stared out the window. A part of me wondered if she was waiting for me to say something big, announce something, confess something, explain myself. But I didn't. Because the truth was, I didn't know her a grand speech. Not anymore. And maybe that's what scared her. That I'd stopped fighting. That I'd stopped trying. That I was no longer clinging to the rusted engine of this marriage, hoping it might someday start again. I had already installed something new, and the car was driving just fine. The quiet carried on for a few more weeks. Janice and I became two people who just shared a roof. We coexisted with the precision of people who had shared a life, not love. She'd make dinner. I'd wash the dishes. She'd do laundry. I'd mow the lawn. From the outside, it probably looked like balance. But beneath it, nothing. One night, she came home late. Not the first time. Not even the third. She didn't bother offering an excuse. She smelled like a mixture of wine and perfume that wasn't hers. I didn't ask. She didn't offer. We just passed each other in the hallway like neighbors. I wasn't interested in tracking her. I wasn't hurt. I'd stopped being hurt the moment I realized I deserved better. I was planning. Not in the "I'm gonna catch her cheating" kind of way. That was beneath me, and frankly, unnecessary. Her loyalty had already eroded long ago. It just hadn't been notarized yet. I started preparing quietly. I talked to a lawyer. A good one. Mara helped me skin paperwork when Janice wasn't home. She didn't ask questions. She didn't need to. I began sorting through everything. Our joint accounts, the house, the car title. I had put my name on everything, or ensured at least equal stake. It wasn't about spite. It was about protecting myself. About making sure that when I walked away, I didn't leave with just the clothes on my back and an old car in the garage. The day I filed for divorce, I took the afternoon off from work, brought the papers down to the courthouse. It was snowing lightly, the kind of Iowa snow that makes everything look quiet and clean. There was no drama, just a signature, a stamp, and the unmistakable feeling of exhaling after holding your breath for years. I didn't tell her that day. I waited, because I wanted it to land differently. A week later, on a Saturday morning, I made coffee, came back into the bedroom, and laid the paperwork on her nightstand. She looked at it like it was a foreign language. Her eyes scanned the top line. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Her jaw tensed. You're serious? I nodded. I've been serious for a long time. You just haven't been paying attention. She sat up, the sheets bunching around her. You're really going to throw all this away? I looked around the room. The stiff, catalog-ready bedspread. The perfectly centered artwork above the headboard. The nightstand drawer I hadn't opened in months because there was nothing of mine in it anymore. What exactly am I throwing away? She didn't answer. You laughed about me to Brenna in the driveway, I added. I was in the garage. I heard everything. Her face froze. You said I'd never leave, that I'd rot in grease and dreams. Guess what? You were half right. She opened her mouth, closed it. I stood, calm, measured. We'll split everything fairly. You can have the house. I'm moving out. You're giving up the house? She asked, confused. I shrugged. It's not a home anymore. She blinked. And what? You're just going to drive off into the sunset in that car. I smiled. Not cruelly. Just peacefully. No. I'm going to drive wherever I want. Because I can now. And that was the most honest thing I'd said in years. I found a small 2-bedroom place outside of town. Nothing fancy. But the garage was just big enough to fit the Chevelle and a workbench. That was all I needed. Mara came with me. She said she couldn't stay with her mother. That watching Janice fake affection, fake interest, fake life, it was too much. She wanted something real. And if that meant an old duplex with mismatched furniture and takeout 3 nights a week, so be it. We set up her room with that shelf I built. She added plants, fairy lights, drawings pinned to the wall. The space looked lived in, human. She told me she was proud of me. You got out, Dad, she said one night. Most people don't. I didn't cry, but something in me loosened. Like a knot that had been pulled tight for decades finally slipped free. We talked more, laughed more. We even started working on a new project together. A '71 Mustang shell I picked up for cheap from an old client who was moving to Arizona. She wants to help with the interior, maybe even try her hand at the wiring. It's not just a car. It's the future. As for Janice, I heard she was upset. She told Brenna I blindsided her, that I was going through a midlife crisis. Funny, coming from the woman who left wine glasses and her dignity over at Brenna's place every other weekend. I never responded, never engaged. I didn't need to, because the real revenge wasn't leaving with anger. It was leaving with purpose. It was giving her exactly what she said I'd never have, the freedom to go, and the courage to do it. She thought I'd rot in grease and dreams. But the car drives now, and so do I.